Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a US elections special, bit of a breaking news update concerning the results coming through from the US from the range of elections that took place yesterday, from kind of big governors races right down to smaller ones that I think are equally as important in what they can tell us. Okay, before we get into it, please like, subscribe and share. That would be deeply appreciated. And do all those YouTubey things. Right, let's get to the results. Okay, sweeping election results. The Democrats, as CNN report, have swept the first major elections of Trump's second term. Before we look at the results in more detail, it's interesting to note Donald Trump's reaction to this. He has said that Trump wasn't on the ballot and shutdown were the two reasons that Republicans lost elections tonight, according to pollsters. So that's some kind of all caps quote from different pollsters. What Trump is essentially saying is that he wasn't on the ballot, but the reality was he was on a ballot. So he's talking in a literal sense, like Trump was not on the ballot. My name wasn't there. When my name is on the ballot, i.e. presidential races, people come out to vote. And this is true, right? He draws a lot of voters to the ballot box, and that is undeniable. But actually, why there were so many who voted in some pretty significant wins for the Democrats was precisely because Trump is in charge at the moment and they are not happy. So although he wasn't technically on the ballot, he was in many senses on the ballot. This was, I think, a referendum for many of the voters on Donald Trump to one degree or another. And what is worrying for the Republicans is that he's not on the ballot in the 2026 November midterm election. So he's got 1 year, and a lot can happen in a year. But at the moment, the trajectory, the polls are looking very, very bad indeed for Trump. And though he won't be on the ballot in November 2026, looking at what's just happened here, he will be on the ballot for all intents and purposes. And it's going to be a referendum on his rule. And at the moment, he is not doing very well on any single topic domain. He is underwater on every single issue. And so the November midterm elections are looking very bad for the Republicans unless they do something significant. They're getting blamed at the moment for the shutdown. So he's now blaming the shutdown on the Democrats winning. And there will be an element of that, especially when places like Virginia are the north of the state of Virginia, particularly, are very close to Washington geographically. There are a lot of civil servants there who are going to be hurting from the government shutdown. So there's an element of truth that the shutdown were the reasons Republican lost the elections tonight. Yes, but I would say he's got one out of two of those correct, because Trump wasn't on the ballot. I mean, Trump really was on a ballot, and that's what brought people to vote. Okay, so let's look at the separate elections. We're going to start with the New York City mayoral election. I did a video on this yesterday talking about Zohran Mamdani. There were some people wondering whether the Republican Curtis Sliwa was going to split the vote for Cuomo, but actually Mamdani won quite handily. Cuomo and Sliwa, if you added those votes together, Mamdani still got more. So he's got over 1 million votes, 1,036,000 so far. It's a projected winner. He's not all votes have been counted, 90% of them so far. But at the moment, he is quite handily winning there. And he has got more votes than the other two combined, considering that Andrew Cuomo is running as an independent, was previously a Democrat. So that is, lots of people are going to be talking about this, because of what it says about New York City, what it says about that kind of populist momentum that Mamdani has represented but keyed into. I mean, he is a left-wing populist himself, but there is this, I think, desire for something different to happen in New York City. There are a lot of young people who came out and voted for him, but not just young people. I think demographically it's going to be interesting to see what the analysis is there. So that's obviously going to take up a lot of what people are going to be talking about in the news at the moment. But I'm almost more interested in all these other results that have come in too. But that is no doubt a huge win. It is a repudiation of Trump, I think, as well. This is a kind of left-wing populist answer to Trump's right-wing populism. So that has happened. Big win for Mamdani. Sort of expected there, even though Trump said, I'm going to hold back funding for New York if Mamdani wins. That didn't stop people coming out and voting for Mamdani. Okay. Then we got the Virginia governor results. This is where the Democratic representative Abigail Spanberger has defeated the Republican, their Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears. And this was a huge victory. So at the moment, it's looking like it's at least it's very much a double-digit victory here. It's over 15 percentage points split the two here. She has win by a handy margin there in Virginia. This was one that most people thought was fairly much in the bag for a couple of reasons. You know, Virginia is pretty much a blue state. She was also defeating a Republican, Glenn Youngkin, who actually wasn't, he didn't do that badly or anything like that. He wasn't like uber Trump, but I think, you know, because he was at the term limits there, he couldn't run again. You more likely see a switch to the other party in these situations, which is what's interesting about the New Jersey governor victory for Mikie Sherrill. Now, I think this was the one that was expected, but the margin there tells you an awful lot. She won by a really considerable margin. And that, I think, tells its own story in terms of what's going on with these elections. You also had beneath her this Virginia Attorney General results. And this is very significant. So although it was somewhat closer, there was still a good almost 7 points difference here between the Democrat and the Republican. Why this is significant is because the Democratic challenger, Jay Jones, won on the back of some controversy where some text messages were leaked, ones where he said he was going to piss on the graves of some Republicans, and they were really like controversial. And it was at some points last night, looking at the live results as they were coming in, it was looking like it was going to be super tight and he might not win it. Actually, he's won in the end fairly convincingly. This is also a flip, and this is a flip where he was embroiled in some controversy. People were thinking there was going to be way more split ticket voting, which means you vote at the top of the ticket for say, for example, a Democrat, and then you come down the ticket and say, actually, I don't like this person down here, and you vote for Republicans. And what has generally seen, I don't know whether there's a trend in the US to see less and less split ticket voting as people become more polarized. So really the party is the main driver of your vote now, rather than individuals and, you know, what their background is and what they say and what they're going to do personally in their position. So although there is a difference between 15%, obviously, with Spanberger and 7% with Jay Jones, so there was some split ticket voting. It was thought that this one was going to be a lot closer, I think, than it really was. So Jay Jones has won there, and that makes it easier for Spanberger to do her thing, because she's not fighting against the Attorney General in the state. So that is significant as well. Then we go to the next governor's race, which was in New Jersey. Now, this was thought to be the one chance for Republicans, because New Jersey has been drifting a little bit more Republican over the years, as far as I understand, than it previously was. And also, you've got the incumbent being a Democrat, Phil Murphy, who I don't think was hugely popular. So you've got the two-term Democrat that can't run again for term limits. And like I was saying with Virginia, normally, or sometimes or often maybe you get a switch. Then we've had two terms of this person from this party. We want a bit of a change. Everyone loves a bit of a change, so you go to the other party. So that's what Mikie Sherrill was running up against, and it was always going to be a lot tighter here. But actually, it was a double-digit win again. So you've got a 30, at least as it stands, or not all votes have been counted, 95%, I think, here. But you've got a 13-point victory for Mikie Sherrill. That is significant. Now, both Mikie Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger are moderates. And I think there's an interesting phenomenon here that Anne Applebaum talked about in the Atlantic some time ago. I mean, this is from months ago, September, beginning of September. The Democrats' Patriotic Vanguard, a small group of lawmakers with military or intelligence backgrounds, prefigured Harris's overtly patriotic campaign. So you have no, sorry, this is from last year. This is from September 2024. So this is before the presidential election. But this is still really relevant for now. So just a bit of background on Abigail Spanberger, who is now the Virginia governor. The audience cheered when Spanberger talked, as she often does, about her notable career trajectory. Famously, she served in the CIA from 2006 to 2014 and has always been circumspect about what exactly she was doing. When she returned home, she told me, quote, "I thought I was done with public service until she was galvanized by the election of Donald Trump. Now, after 3 hard-fought wins in purple district congressional races, her aspirations stretch beyond the Virginia governor's mansion. She wants to change the way Americans talk about politics. Quote, we want to turn a page past the divisiveness and angriness and just focus on brass tacks, good policy and governance," she says. So that talks to her kind of being a moderate, but also being one of these NatSec Democrats, these kind of Democrats who've been involved in public service with the armed forces. And actually, there are a number of them. And this article talks about a number of them. So you've got Jason Crow from Colorado, Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, Mikie Sherrill of New Jersey, and Elisa Slotkin of Michigan. So the Michigan senator there was also involved, Elisa Slotkin, in the CIA, I think. Most are in their 40s or early 50s, many from purple districts and swing states. They're sometimes called NatSec Democrats. National security, a phrase that explains their origins but doesn't quite encompass who they are or what they do. Most, it is true, are veterans of the military or intelligence agencies. Most entered Congress in 2018. Most hadn't been in politics before that. Some of them were helped or encouraged by Moulton, a former Marine who was first elected in Congress in Massachusetts in 2014, made a quixotic run for president in 2020 and created the Serve America PAC, which backed 15 of the 28 Democrats who flipped the House in 2018. Moulton told me that Trump inspired a lot of veterans to consider political careers for the first time and to run as Democrats. Quote, he's so uniquely unpatriotic and anti-American. I mean, this is a guy who didn't try to hide the fact that he was a draft dodger, he said. The people who signed up were suckers. The people who got killed are losers. That's what Trump said. Right. So you got this NatSec Democrat movement. And the article later, and Applebaum later says, the group's attitude also redefines what it means to be a moderate in the Democratic Party. By any older standard, Spanberger, Slotkin, Moulton, Sherrill, and Crow might have been called progressives. They believe in abortion rights, for example, a cause once avoided by what used to be called conservative Democrats, and have joined pro-abortion rights caucuses. But if, again, a moderate nowadays is someone willing to talk with the other side in order to find solutions, then the group is a bunch of moderates. Sherrill said she could see the appeal of what she described as a progressive model of politics, quote, deciding what you want and accepting nothing else until you get it. But there is also a risk to that model because you might not get anything at all. Had the Democrats in Congress been more willing to bargain with the Trump administration over the border, she thinks, they might have secured concessions for dreamers, the children who arrived in the US with their undocumented parents and have no citizenship status. Still, the NatSec Democrats' deeper objection is not to any particular ideological faction, but rather to politicians who, as Spanberger says, quote, don't actually want to fix anything because, quote, performance is all there is. As an example, she cited the border control bill that was written and shepherded through the Senate by senior conservative Republicans, but was then blocked, to the surprise of the bill's authors, by Trump, who thought that fixing the border might help Biden. Her friends, by contrast, want to fix things. The border, the healthcare system, even democracy itself. Having served in places that have collapsed into chaos, they know what it's like to live in places that don't have governance of any kind. They also learned how to operate in that sort of chaos, which is useful now too. Elisa Slotkin, a Middle East analyst who was elected to the House from Michigan, in 2018 and is now running for the Senate, and she is now a senator, says she still thinks the same way about solving problems as she did when she worked for the CIA, the National Security Council, and the Defense Department, among other previous employers. Okay, so, and then you've got, Jason Crow, Army Ranger and paratrooper, former, obviously, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, serving in Colorado. And then, so this is interesting as well. A few months after Spanberger's rally on a rather hotter summer day, I watched Mikie Sherrill, who's now the governor for New Jersey, as predicted or projected, speaking at an event held at the Ukrainian Cultural Center in Whippany. The Congresswoman, an Annapolis graduate and ex-Navy helicopter pilot, was introduced by Thomas Ace Gallagher, mayor of Hanover Township. Gallagher is a Republican, but Hanover suffers from flooding, and Sherrill, he said, had helped the district get money and attention from the Army Corps of Engineers. Quote, she's on the Democratic side of the aisle, he told the room, but for me, there are not two sides. There's people that serve and work together and are focused on the common good. As for everybody else, they can do whatever they want to do as long as they don't get in the way of our good work. Soon, he predicted, you are going to see many people that are more moderate working together on true solutions to our problems. Okay, so the point being that the two governors that have won their races, quite handily, are moderate NatSec Democrats running in areas where that appeals. In somewhat moderate, I mean, New Jersey is trending slightly more Republican in recent years, i.e. it's maybe slightly more purple, and Virginia, has its own sort of background, but the moderates appeal here, and NatSec Democrats do a good job of appealing to moderates as they can fall back on their national service. Okay, then you have had on the ballot in the US last night, California Prop 50. So this is Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, saying, hey, hang on, we're going to fight fire with fire. They're going to gerrymander here, there, and everywhere. We are going to put gerrymandering on the election ballot, and you can vote for Prop 50, which will be our response to gerrymandering everywhere else, but we are going to do it through the electoral process. We're going to do it democratically. If you guys want us to change the districts in California, then vote for Proposition 50. And you know what they did? And they did massively. So you have almost a 30-point victory for Proposition 50 here. So you are going to see gerrymandering take place in California, which is somewhat controversial because, they have said, hey, hang on, this is not good what's happening elsewhere. But it's the idea of, well, we just sit back and let the other guys do it and we don't do it ourselves. We are going to lose, and we're going to lose power even more. And also the Democrats can say, well, actually, during the Biden administration, we did take this to, we had a bill to stop partisan gerrymandering, and all the Republicans voted against it. So you've had your chance to do this democratically, and we're going to do our gerrymandering on foundation of a democratic vote rather than just change the districts by fiat. We're going to do it on the basis of a democratic vote. But we gave you a chance back in Biden to do this properly, and you said no. So we don't have a problem with fighting fire with fire. That's Gavin Newsom's position, and he's taken the electorate with him there with a really significant victory in that vote. But there are a couple of smaller elections that are also worthwhile noticing. Pennsylvania State Supreme Court results. You had some 3 Supreme Court justices who were up for election, and they all maintained their seats, maintaining the Democratic majority in the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. That is significant as well. And all of these victories were pretty handy too. So good 20-point plus victories for all of those Supreme Court justices. In fact, they are all almost entirely the same, sort of 23% victories there. Then there was another significant victory that was kind of a bit more obscure. This happened in Georgia. And why this is important is because Jon Ossoff, as the senator in Georgia, is going to come up for election, and people are wondering. I mean, I think he's a really good senator, but Georgia is quite an interesting state these days, and he might be somewhat worried that there could be a Republican push back, even though he's done a good job as senator. You look at elections like this, so Democrats win big in the Georgia Public Service Commission's race. So what the heck is this race? Well, this is so let's have a look. If there's a description of what these people do. So basically it's to do with holding utilities to account and regulating utilities in the state of Georgia, as far as I understand it. It doesn't actually say there. Now, these are, the Public Service Commission seats. Now, these are seats that Republicans have held 5-0, 5-0 for I don't know how long, like 20 years plus, something like that. And there were some really big wins in Georgia with 2 seats up for grabs, and the Democrats won by 20-point margins over incumbent Republicans on the 5-member utility board. Peter Hubbard and Alicia Johnson projected to win there very handily indeed. That tells you something about Georgia, and it also just is an indication, I think, both from a national point of view and I think from a Georgia point of view, and is good news for Ossoff, I think, going forward. It's at least something that you can look at and say, yeah, we could have a good time in the midterms, because there appears to be, at least at the present time, and it is still a year away, the midterms still are a year away though, but there does seem to be a repudiation of Donald Trump with these kind of votes. You wouldn't expect that sort of election result in Public Service Commission elections unless there was something else going on, right? And that something else going on is people are really peed off with Donald Trump and his agenda, his policy agenda. So I think when you look at all of these, this is, I think, about as good a night as the Democrats could have asked for. You got double-digit wins in both the state governor races, and one of those was, people are thinking it could have been tight and ended up not being tight at all. You have the New York City mayoral race with the Democratic Socialist winning handily, more than the combined votes of the other 2 candidates. You have Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Democrats held on to that. You've got the Virginia Attorney General winning, having to overcome some controversy there and some dodgy texts that he, outright apologized for, in that he did so in the debate against the Republican candidate Meirez, but still won fairly decently there. And then you've got these Public Service Commission board members being voted in as Democrats onto the 5-person, previously completely Republican board. All of these results are good news for the Democrats, and the Republicans are going to have to come up with a narrative here. So the narrative for Trump is, I wasn't on the ballot. He was, effectively. I mean, that's precisely why there's been this Democratic sweep. And he says the government shutdown, which I do agree probably has something to do with it. But yeah, I was listening to a Republican analyst on CNN this morning who was saying, these are Democrat states. So, what are you going to do? Virginia and New Jersey, these are basically Democrat states. So, of course, they're going to win there. Yeah, but look at the margins. Look at the context. So I think while you will get a number of Republican analysts and strategists try to spin this, I think this is effectively a repudiation of Trump here. Anyway, let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.